Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to the NFL Stack Show. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the NFL Week 7 slate, including a divisional game, which I think can go over the total. It's the game of the week, and it's not being played in Kansas City. Stay tuned to find out. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCom here with Heatseeker Sports. And today I'm going to go over the Week 7 NFL slate for DFS. We'll be taking a look through the eyes of Draftkings to find out which values we find that might be worth plugging into our lineups today based on matchups and whatnot. And we're going to be looking at a few games which I think might be good targets for game stacks, which can help us out with salary relief to help us get some of those studs in there. It's going to be a thin slate this week, which is always a good thing. Gives us a lot of opportunity for creativity and to think a little bit outside the box on the slate. And we will take a look at that. But first, give me a like on the video. I'm looking for about 15 likes, and I'll be able to put out some videos with under the radar targets. I'm going to put out a few shorts this week with maybe quarterbacks to target and running backs to target and wide receivers to target. So hit that like button. I'm looking for 15 to get those videos unlocked, and subscribe to the YouTube page if you haven't already. If you haven't found this channel yet, this is a channel where I like to go through game scripts of individual games, in particular for Showdown and Draftkings analysis, where we like to break down those games. Sometimes I'll have guests on the show with me too to break down the games. I've actually had a hot streak with one of my guests, Spread. We've been nailing a bunch of the game scripts, a bunch of the captains in those DraftKings Showdown contests. So you're going to want to subscribe to the page to get access to those videos. And in the meantime, let's take a look at this DraftKings slate and find out what looks good in Week 7. We'll go through it game by game here. Taking a look first at the Detroit-Baltimore game. I actually like this game. I think that this game has a lot of potential for upside. There is a weather concern. We got to keep track of how the wind is looking in this game. We don't want to see the sustained winds over that 19 mile an hour mark. We want to make sure that there's going to be no real wind issues in this game before we commit to anything. But the game itself is looking pretty spicy. We got Lamar Jackson versus Detroit. We got Detroit, a team that's able to fight back. This is a game that could easily be a back and forth. They're playing it in Baltimore. That's the only downside. It's not being played in Detroit, where we got that dome. And Goff isn't always the best on the road, but he's overcome that a little bit recently. Let's take a look at his game log. When he played at Tampa Bay, he scored 25 DraftKings points. He had a rough game at Green Bay with only 12 DraftKings points, and now he's on the road at Baltimore. So he's had one game, away game this year, where he kind of broke his away curse, but otherwise he's usually pretty much in this 12 to 15 range when he's on the road. So Jared Goff might not be a guy that I'd be all that interested in, but Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, his offense has looked a little bit sluggish. They pulled out the win last week against Tennessee. Didn't overly outperform with his fantasy points. Only scored 18 DraftKings points in that game. And other than that, he's only had 3 weeks this season where he's been relevant in fantasy. He had 23 points in week 2 against Cincinnati, 32 in week 3 against Indy, and 29 against Cleveland. A lot of that has to do with his receivers just dropping the ball and not being able to complete on passes and whatnot. If Lamar is able to get it together this week, that sets him up pretty good to have a big week against Detroit. Let's see what Detroit's defense is doing in this matchup. Detroit has faced basically a bunch of scrubs at quarterback this year, except for Patrick Mahomes in week one. So their numbers are a little bit deceptive in how many DraftKings points they're allowing to quarterback and receivers, but they're allowing 19 points a game to the running backs, 14 points a game to wideouts. So little bit middling there. On the other side with Baltimore, Detroit is allowing 25 points to the slot and 14.7 points to tight end. And that's where Baltimore's best receivers are. We got Zay Flowers in the slot, and we got obviously Mark Andrews at the tight end position. So Zay Flowers is running 30% of his routes from the slot. Nelson Aguilar is another slot receiver. He's running 65% of his routes from the slot. But Zay Flowers gets enough of a taste of that slot to make him relevant in this game. Let's see what his price is on DraftKings this week. We are looking at 5,700. So he's getting up there in price. But Zay Flowers is going to be interesting this week if you want to get one of these Lamar stacks in there. Lamar Jackson is 7,600. Let's find out where that is relative to the entire slate. That would put him at 1, 2, 3, 4, QB4. So he's not that cheap. So it's not a cheap stack that we like, but it's a game that's pretty interesting, anyways. And Lamar Jackson to Zay Flowers or Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews is an interesting stack. And I'm not going to recommend Jahmyr Gibbs because I'm done with recommending that guy. But he's got the best, point potential matchup against Baltimore. The only problem is that Baltimore is the favorites in this game, and I don't know that we're going to see a very running back friendly script on the Detroit side. But Jahmyr Gibbs should be involved in the passing game. I've said that a few times recently, and Jahmyr Gibbs disappoints every time. So if you can find a way around Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe with one of these receivers, Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra might be interesting. Amon-Ra he's too expensive. So yeah, I like the Baltimore side in this one, but it's a little bit expensive. I'll probably pass on it as far as hitting those stacks. We got Vegas versus Chicago. Vegas has been a disaster this year on defense. Their defense is not that great. Chicago is also a disaster on defense, so this has sloppy shootout potential. We are talking about two teams that are both starting backup quarterbacks this week. We got Brian Hoyer going for the Raiders, and he is only 4,900, which is interesting. And we got Baggett against the starting for the Bears, and he's at 4,900 as well. Baggett is an interesting guy. He did all right in the preseason. He's a Division II guy, a rookie. Don't know what to expect out of him. Max Crosby in that pass rush could end up devouring this guy, or he could end up being one of those cheap guys that comes through. He's playing at home in Chicago. I'd be more interested in this game, though, in Brian Hoyer if I was going to go any direction with those stacks. Chicago has been susceptible to the pass. This is a game with a lowest total on the slate. We're looking at 37.5 points, 3-point spread. Las Vegas is the favorites in it. So we got Chicago as the home dogs, but this is a rough matchup. I like DJ Moore in this matchup just because, the first read for Baggett is going to be DJ Moore. I was watching a clip with Warren Sharp earlier today, and he was talking about maybe hitting the overs on some of that DJ Moore receiving props. So maybe think about that. I'm kind of on that same page. I think DJ Moore would be the guy that Baggett kind of starts to depend on in this game. Usually, like you can see, like tight ends being that safety valve for rookies, but I think when you got a receiver like Moore, I think he would be a good safety valve. And last week when Fields went out, it looks like Cole Kmet only had 2.9 points last week. And how many did we get for DJ Moore? DJ Moore last week had he had 8 targets last week, 5 receptions for 51 yards. So don't be surprised if you see a lot of targets to Moore. If he's able to break one off, that would be good. He's at 6,500, which is pretty cheap for a guy of his skill set. Running back Josh Jacobs is probably he's probably the main guy to target in this entire matchup. Honestly, with Chicago. Is giving up a decent amount of points to the running back position. They're giving up 28.5 points per game. Draftkings points a game to the running back position. Las Vegas is giving up 23 points per game to the running back position. Vegas is also giving up 23.9 points a game to the slot. Slot is Hunter Renfrow, and obviously we've seen Chicago's giving up that 23.9 points. Slot is Hunter Renfrow for Vegas, and we don't really like him. So maybe Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers has been hot lately. He plays 30% of his routes from the slot. And Jacoby Myers, he's had 17 points last week. He had 20 points the week before that. And he's had a couple other big weeks too. So Jacoby Myers is a guy that's interesting this week. And he is 6,200. So he's pretty cheap. And he's definitely interesting. Devontae Adams is always going to be interesting. Question is going to be is who is Hoyer going to throw to? So we want to kind of keep our expectations in check on what Hoyer can deliver. But Hoyer to Myers stacks might be interesting in this game with maybe running it back with DJ Moore. Like that would be kind of a cheap stack, but something to consider this week given this matchup. But it's the lowest total on the game, and I really don't see a sloppy shootout in this game necessarily with both teams starting backups. Normally, it would have sloppy shootout written all over it, but it's a little bit tricky to get into this game this week. For the Chicago side, Foreman is going to be Deontay Foreman is going to be the starter. It looks like he is, he's a guy that when he's come in these opportunities, he's hit it out of the park. Last game he played was week 6. So last week he had 15 attempts for 65 yards. He had a pretty good game. Just, didn't go over the top with it, but 4.3 yards per carry, and he had only 1 target. So if he's used significantly in this game this week, then Deontay Foreman could be interesting. He's only at 4,800, which is pretty cheap for a running back. So keep him in mind. And as I mentioned, Josh Jacobs is probably the most competent guy in the best the best situation this week in this matchup, with the amount of points that Chicago is allowing to running backs. But again, with this low total, Josh Jacobs might be and Jacoby Myers might be the only guys that I'm interested in really for this matchup, and DJ Moore to a lesser extent. I would go crazy with stacking that game. If we look at Cleveland versus Indy is another game that's somewhat interesting. Like on the Cleveland side, it looks like Deshaun Watson is on, trending towards playing this week. He's still questionable. He's missed a couple games with a shoulder injury. What's Indy giving up on defense? If we look at Indy versus Cleveland, Cleveland's best matchup is the running back. They got Indy is allowing 24 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. They are allowing 20 points a game to the quarterback position, and they're allowing 24 points a game to the slot and 13 points a game to tight end. Those are all good matchups for those players. Maybe Deshaun Watson to Elijah Moore would be an interesting if you want to take the passing game in this. How much would that cost us? Deshaun Watson is 5,700. He's still cheap. Deshaun Watson's still cheap. And for wide receiver, we are looking at, let's see, where's he at? Elijah Moore is 4,200. So that's cheap too for a wide receiver, given that the matchup for slots are the best, and Watson in general is going to have reduced like power in his throwing arm. I don't hate Deshaun Watson to Elijah Moore stacks, but we don't know how healthy Deshaun Watson is going to be, and Indy's playing with Minshew as the backup. It's a pretty close spread. It's only 2.5-point spread. Last time I checked, that might be different now that Deshaun Watson is trending towards playing. So keep an eye on that spread. If it stays close, this could be an interesting game. But I just don't like Indy's matchup against that defense of Cleveland. Cleveland's been playing lights out in their defense, and Indy is on their backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew. But given the coaching on that team, I wouldn't put it past Indy to be able to pull something out. But I generally would stay away from this game, maybe unless I'm using Jerome Ford, who has that good matchup against the run. Jerome Ford has not done anything lately either, which we like to see. He's played San Francisco and Baltimore and Tennessee, which are all tough run Ds. He scored 19 fantasy points against Tennessee, which is a big week. Last easy running matchup he faced was Pittsburgh, and he scored 27 fantasy points that week. So, I could see a 20-point plus night for Jerome Ford at 5,100. That makes him a good play, I think, this week. But as far as a game stack, I probably trending towards staying away from this one. They are playing in Indy, which is indoors, which makes it all the more interesting. But given Watson's injury situation and the backup starting for Indy, if this was Anthony Richardson, then this would be like a cheap stack for sure that we would want to target. But given that it's Gardner Minshew, I don't know if that's a way I want to go. Michael Pittman under Minshew has done pretty well. He had 22.9 points last week, and there was another week that he had a pretty big week when Richardson went out. I think maybe he scored like 17. Maybe it wasn't as big as I thought. But Pittman would be interesting, but I just don't like that defense for Cleveland going up against that defense. I don't think it's worth it. We got plenty of other options on the slate, so we can probably just skip this one. Let's take a look at Buffalo versus New England. It's another division game. They usually play each other pretty well. It's kind of a heated rivalry. You could tell, like last year when they played that win game, or 2 years ago, whenever it was, when they played that win game in Buffalo, I believe, and like New England literally ran the ball on every play, and it just like you could tell it was just like infuriating the coach on the Buffalo side. And after that, they made a statement against New England in the playoffs, and just stomped New England in the first round of the playoffs, made New England look like a joke, and now they face each other again. This is a matchup that can be unpredictable sometimes. You never know which way it's really going to go. As far as the total and everything that we're looking at a 41.5-point total. 8.5-point favorites are the Bills. New England is giving it up to running back, and they're giving it up to wide receiver. 23 points to running back, 18 points to wide receiver. Buffalo is also giving it up to running back at 25 points, and wide receiver, they're giving up 18 points a game. So, given those numbers, who knows which direction to necessarily go with this game. But I could see Mac Jones, with all the just crap he's been getting lately, just kind of coming out and pulling something something out against a division opponent. He's at 4,900. His game log is looking really bad this year. He had that one good week against Philly in week 1, but he has not done anything since. So, Mac Jones, he's 4,900, and he's playing a team that could take a lead and put him in a negative game script where he's forced to throw. Mac Jones has shown potential to put up those big weeks in the past, but I just don't think he has the weapons really. Like Kendrick Bourne, you're gonna stack him with. If you stack him with Kendrick Bourne, he's 4,400. If you're playing Mac Jones, you probably want to stack him with 2 guys. So, Bourne and Parker maybe. But yeah, I mean, I just don't like this game too much. Diggs has a good matchup. He's done well against New England, even though New England supposedly tries to take away the top weapons. Deontay Hardy has a good matchup, but we don't know how much they're going to have to throw. This game with Josh Allen on top of that, he's got a hurt throwing arm right now, so I just don't really feel anything in this game. So I'm not really going there with the Buffalo New England game. It feels like a week where we're able to easily knock out some of these games. So it's going to be good if we can condense our player pool to a few games this week. Stephon Diggs, let me take a look real quick at his history versus New England, because I'm pretty sure he's done really good against New England throughout his career. Let's see. Let me take a look at Pro Football Reference, and I'll give you an idea of what he has done against New England recently. Last year, he had one game where he went 10 targets, 7 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 92 yards, and a touchdown. In 2021, 13 targets, 7 receptions, 85 yards, and a touchdown. So he's 3 games in a row he scored a touchdown. He had another big game in 2020, 11 targets, 9 receptions, 145 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That same year, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 92 yards, no touchdowns in that one. But Diggs, 1, 2, 3, 4 out of his last 5 games, he scored touchdowns in New England, including that 3 touchdown game. That one game where he has not scored a touchdown was the win game against New England, where they lost 10-14. So just to give you an idea of how Steph has done against New England, Steph Diggs is definitely a guy you're going to want in your player pool. And he might even go overlooked a little bit this week if people are trying to jam in a bunch of those Kansas City Chargers guys. So Steph Diggs is, he's definitely a guy that we want in our player pool tonight or on Sunday. So if we're going on to Washington versus New York, this is a game that I'm interested in. This one has sloppy shootout written all over it. These are the games that I like to target on weeks like this, because we don't have many games to compete with. There's not going to be a lot of games going over the total this week. And this is a game that could do it. We got a lot of low totals this week. This is one of the games that I'll be targeting as a sloppy shootout, and for good reason. The amount of points that these two teams are giving up on the fantasy side has been pretty good. We're looking at a 39.5 point total. I think this game is one that can go over that total. The spread is only 2 points, which we like to see, especially in a divisional game, where we know that they can have a lot of back and forth because they're going to be familiar with each other's defenses. The Giants side, we got Tyrod Taylor coming in for Daniel Jones. Tyrod was able to shake off a lot of the rust against Buffalo last week, so he gets a much easier opponent in Washington, who has not been good on defense this year. That gives him an advantage in the quarterback position because Washington is giving up 22.5 Draftkings points to the quarterback position this season, and they are giving up 22.5 to wideouts. And those are the two guys that I'm most interested in is Tyrod Taylor and Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt is a guy that I've been kind of keeping an eye on, waiting for him to get an opportunity. Let's take a look at Jalen Hyatt here, if we can even find him. Jalen Hyatt is at 3,000. Last week, he ran the most routes that he's ran all season. He got 4 targets, 3 reception, and 4 targets. Now, Washington is susceptible to perimeter receivers, which is another reason why we like Jalen Hyatt this week. He's shown a lot of upside in the past when he's had opportunity. You can see that he had 2 targets for 2 receptions for 89 yards back in week 2 versus Arizona, the last time he faced a pretty bad pass defense. Seattle's a pretty bad pass defense, and so is Miami, but he didn't really have opportunity against Miami. He only put up 2 receptions for 10 yards against Seattle. But I think that after last week, it kind of signaled to us that they want to start using Jalen Hyatt more. The fact that he ran a whole bunch of routes sounds like they're getting fed up with their wide receiver core and they're starting to consolidate a little bit. So Jalen Hyatt is an interesting guy this week, and he is only 3K, and he's also less than 1% projected ownership right now. I haven't listened to any content this week, so I don't know if he's going to be getting steamed. But Jalen Hyatt is the guy that is on my radar for sure, and he's only 3K. And this is a game that I think can go over the total. I don't mind stacking him with Tyrod Taylor. Taylor in this matchup, he's in a good spot. He's in a good spot against a bad defense, and he's one of those veteran guys that can take advantage of those types of matchups. Daniel Jones, obviously, he's a veteran too, but Daniel Jones has been bad all year. I think Tyrod Taylor, is a clean slate right now for the Giants with Daniel Jones. Looks like he's going to be out. He's on the doubtful side of questionable. So Tyrod Taylor, we've seen him in the past come in these games and have good big games. He's got that rushing upside to him. Obviously the same as we see with Daniel Jones. The offensive line on New York is a mess. And, Tyrod will probably be doing a lot of runs this week. He had 5 rushing attempts last week for 24 yards, to give you an idea. And that was in his first game back as a starter in a long time. So Tyrod Taylor, if he's shaking off enough of that rust, he can put out a big game against a defense like this. And, they're playing in New York, so he's playing at home. So, yeah, don't be surprised to see Taylor, have a big game, and I would not be surprised if Jalen Hyatt. This is kind of a breakout game for Jalen Hyatt with the amount of targets that he had last week and the amount of activities like he had last week. Says he played on 73% of New York's offensive snaps. This is the highest that he's had in his career. 73% is a huge number for Jalen Hyatt, and if Tyrod was comfortable enough to throw to him 4 times last week, then look out if he's able to hit on a couple conversions this week. Also like Wan'Dale Robinson. I wouldn't hate it if you started a double stack. Wan'Dale is only 3,800, and you know what? Let's start. Let's just cut the chase here and get Tyrod in the lineup, and let's put in Robinson and Hyatt as his stack partners. Let's put in Diggs because we just saw Diggs had a really good matchup. So let's get Diggs in there too. So we'll just kind of build this as we're going along. This is one of the sloppy stacks that I want to target this week. So we'll just get that going now. Terry McLaurin on the other side. New York, they're weakest against the running back. They're giving up 27 points a game to the running back. So if you wanted to put Brian Robinson in there, I don't blame you. With Washington being favorites, but they are playing on the road. But I would not be surprised to see like a Jahan Dotson or how many targets has Jahan Dotson gotten recently? Jahan Dotson only got one target last week. He's been really slow this year, but he's due to break out. Jahan Dotson is definitely on the radar for a breakout. Terry McLaurin's been a little bit better. He had that 122.6 point week against Philly, but he's also 5,400 versus Dotson, who is 4,600. So I would lean McLaurin just based on his targets. It seems like Sam Howell likes McLaurin better. So, if you plug in McLaurin into this lineup as the run back, like it kind of fills up our scorecard already. But let's say for that Chargers game, if we want to look at this Chargers game, really like Kelsey and Eckler are really the only guys that I'm interested in there. That leaves us with 3,600. Like we still got to put our defense in. So if we put in, let's see, let's find a cheap defense here. Patriots versus Buffalo, Chargers, Cardinals. Cardinals versus Seattle. I don't hate Cardinals versus Seattle. I think Geno has been overrated. Was massively overrated coming into the season. You know what? I actually wouldn't hate starting Kansas City's defense against the Chargers. That would definitely be kind of against the grain this week. But what is this matchup? Like Mahomes has not been putting up. The Chiefs have just not been putting up a ton of points this year. Let's take a look at the points that they've had this season as an offense. They put up 20 points against Detroit, 17 against Jacksonville, 41 versus Chicago. We can scratch that off the board. 23 versus the Jets, 27 versus Minnesota, and 19 versus Denver. So they've been kind of an anemic offense compared to what we're used to with the Chiefs, which is interesting. I think that Mahomes' weapons are just catching up to him because he's only got Kelsey, and I've said it several times on this show, or the shows that I've been doing, is that Kelsey's not getting any younger, and Patrick Mahomes doesn't have any other weapons to throw to. Patrick Mahomes has not elevated anyone else. He hasn't elevated anyone beyond Kelsey and Tyreek Hill. If you don't include like running backs, Pacheco's looked all right. But like Mahomes has not elevated any pass catchers that he's played with in his career. Basically, there hasn't been a pass catcher in Mahomes' career that was not there before he got there that he was able to elevate. But I do actually see some signs of that happening with Rashee Rice, who's been interesting lately. It looks like he's starting to kind of take that lead wide receiver role. He's got a good matchup against the Chargers, but like given if we're stacking this other game and we put Kelsey and Eckler in there, those are the two guys that I'm looking for. But if we're looking for that defense there, I don't hate the Chiefs defense because the Chiefs are a different team this year than they usually are. They're a defensive minded team instead of an offensive minded team. And like the Chargers haven't been great, and the Chiefs are playing at home, and I could see lots of mistakes being made by Herbert this week. So let's say just for the hell of it, we put in Chiefs D. That leaves us with about 4,800 at the running back position. We should be able to find some value this week, like with everything going on with these injuries. We got Deontay Foreman right at that 4,800 mark. We have Antonio Gibson, Jerick McKinnon. We got Justice Hill or Gus Edwards if you wanted either of those guys. But it looks like Detroit's got a pretty good run defense this year. Let's see. Roshan Johnson is out. That sucks. He would have been a great play this week. Tyler Algier is interesting because the way that game script is shaping up, with Tampa hasn't been able to take leads, and they need to take the lead to drive Desmond Ritter to throw the ball instead of run the ball. I think the Falcons should be able to control the game flow this week, which means they'll be running the ball a ton, which makes Algier interesting at 4,500. Other than that, I'm not really seeing a whole lot that I like. Yeah, I'm not seeing a whole lot that I like beyond that. If we wanted to, maybe take McLaurin out, let's see if we wanted to take a look at Robinson, knowing that he's got a pretty good matchup. Brian Robinson against the Giants there. Let's see. That leaves us with 4,400. And if that leaves us a flex at 4,400, let's see. That leaves us with some options here. Josh Reynolds, if we wanted to start him. Elijah Moore, there's Elijah Moore that we talked about in the Cleveland side. Let's see if we can find someone even cheaper than that. We already got Jalen Hyatt in there for 3K. Otherwise, he'd be a great guy, like to put in as a salary relief. Even Kyle Pitts is like 4K, but Jonnu Smith's getting all the work over there. Royce Freeman might be interesting. With the situation with the Rams right now, they just lost Kylan Williams. So we're not really sure who's going to be the starting running back over there. Yeah, I take that back. He's not going to be interesting because it's going to be a mess. Ooh, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Smith-Njigba is interesting this week because he's only 3,900 and he got a monster boost last week. Recorded 4 catches on 5 targets for 48 yards. Let's see. He managed, I believe last week he had his highest target share, and I think he ran the most routes that he's run so far last week. It looked like they were trying to incorporate him more into the offense. So Smith-Njigba at 3,900 is definitely interesting in that matchup because Arizona is very vulnerable to the pass. Kadarius Toney is only 3,800. He's the only other receiver that I really am interested in on the Chiefs. We got Jameson Williams. He came back last week for Detroit, and he scored a touchdown. Jameson Williams is a guy with a ton of upside, but just in that Goff on the road, playing outside, like maybe a situation with wind. Let's see. We also got Slayton. Slayton's 3,700. So all those guys are cheap on the Giants, but I don't want to add another Giant into this stack. Rondale Moore has a good matchup against Seattle. Let's say we go with one of these Chiefs guys, just to get another one. Oh, you know what? Who else is interesting? Let's see if how much he is. Let's see if we can get another receiver from this game in here. Yeah, Rashee Rice is just a little bit out of our reach at 4,700. Eckler is really the main guy that I'm interested in. The Chargers side, Joshua Palmer, I'm a little bit interested in, but like if I'm gonna go with crapshoot like Palmer, I'd rather like stack one of these cheap games. The Atlanta Tampa Bay game, I'm not too interested in that one either. I do like the like the running side of Atlanta in that game, but not a whole lot. Let's see. Pittsburgh Rams is interesting, like as far as Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup. They are, pretty expensive. Like Nakua is obviously the cheaper one, but the the Rams have a pretty good matchup against Pittsburgh. Uh, Pittsburgh is giving up 32 points a game to the slot position, and obviously, Puka and Cup are pretty set up in that spot. Cooper Cup, 56% of his routes from the slot. Puka Nakua is 33% of his routes from the slot. Even Tutu Atwell is getting 45% of his routes from the slot. So all those guys are interesting in that matchup. Pickens, on the other side, there's no one really to run it back with because the Rams have actually been pretty good. Fryermuth would have been a guy, but he just got put on IR because Pittsburgh Rams are giving up 15 points a game to the slot. I mean, to the tight end. So really only interested in Puka and Cup in this game from a wide receiver perspective. I just don't know how that's going to shake out. But the Rams have a good matchup, like from the running back perspective. I just don't know who would start. I've heard Zach Evans mentioned. Zach Evans had 4 attempts for 10 yards last week. I think that it would make a lot more sense to use the passing game as an extension of the run game. And so expect to see a lot of dump offs to Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup this week. So I like them a lot. Arizona versus Seattle. Kenneth Walker has a great matchup this week. Let's see. Arizona's giving up 29.6 DraftKings points a game to running back. They're also giving up 21.4 points a game to quarterback and 28 points a game to slot receivers. Now, on the other side, Seattle's giving up 32.7 points a game to slot receivers, and they're giving up 19 points a game to quarterback. So the only spot that each of these defenses is strong against is tight end. And, I really don't care about tight end in this game. So this is another sloppy shootout special here. So let's clear this out. Let's see. Let's say we go with Geno in this game. Let's say Geno has a comeback game this week. I kind of like Lockett better in this matchup than Metcalf. I even like Smith and Jigba a little bit in this matchup too. But let's say it's a week where, I like Lockett. Like I like Kenneth Walker too. I'd almost go with Geno, Walker, Lockett. Like say, they're able to get a significant lead, and Walker is able to run it out. The question is, which slot receiver do we want for the Arizona side to run it back with? Rondale Moore, 68% of his routes from the slot. Mike Wilson, 30% of his routes from the slot. Let's take a look at those guys, see what they've done. Rondale Moore, 7 targets last week, 5 targets the week before that. He's been getting decent targets. in a good matchup, like he could break one off pretty easily. Wilson, 4 targets, 2 targets, 7 targets. He hasn't really done anything in a few weeks, but he's shown that upside with that 26 points against San Francisco. But maybe Rondale is the guy in this matchup. So we've got like a relatively cheap options there. Let's put in Hyatt. You know how much I like him. Let's put in Diggs, and let's try to get in Eckler. See where that leaves us. 7K. Let's see if we wanted to put in. Man, we could go a variety of different teams here. Let's say we want to go with the Chiefs again in this build. That leaves us with 4,600. It gives you options at the tight end position. Jonnu Smith, I mentioned before, he's getting all the work. Kyle Pitts, you'd have that option too. Cole Kmet, if you want a guy from that Chicago game. Njoku, we talked about how Njoku's got a good matchup already. We got Musgrave. He's got a good matchup against Denver. Musgrave started getting some targets. He's got 7 targets last week when, like Luke Musgrave dropping that ball at the end of that game. If he'd have caught that ball, I would have had a seat to the King of the Beach, King of the Beach contest. I was one, like less than like 2 points away from winning that thing, and Luke Musgrave was in my lineup, and he dropped that ball at the end, and it just killed me. Donald Parham would be interesting, especially like as one of the main red zone guys in a game with what's the total on that 48.5 point total. So Parham is interesting, this week at that price. So yeah, that gives you a few ideas. Gerald Everett even in that matchup too. How are Chargers versus like the tight end is like probably one of the weakest spots in Kansas City's defense. So that definitely makes those guys interesting. If you wanted to go there, like you'd be getting different from the field too, for sure. I'd probably want to run it back with at least one of these Chiefs. Maybe instead of Walker, since we're going the passing game in Seattle, maybe we put in Pacheco. Chargers haven't been all that bad against the run, but that leaves us like 5,500 for tight end. So that opens things up a lot. Gives us an option for Sam Laporta. But Baltimore's really good against tight end. Darren Waller in our game, Giants game. If you wanted to take out Hyatt and put in Laporta, put in Waller, 3,500. Nah, that doesn't get us to Jahan Dotson. I was thinking that might get us to Jahan Dotson. So yeah, leaves you with options at the tight end position. But Seattle versus Arizona is another one of those sloppy stacks to target this week. Now, Green Bay, Denver, like this is another one. We got a few of these games this week that we can target. Now, Green Bay, Denver, if we wanted to go that route, I think that Jordan Love's got a like a pretty good matchup, obviously, with Denver. It's just basically you can attack them any way you want, and Aaron Jones is coming off, I believe, a hamstring injury, and we don't like those soft tissue injuries and say it every time. 45-point total in that game. Jordan Love, 23 points is what Denver's given up to quarterbacks this year. 40.7 points to the running back position. If Aaron Jones is healthy, then he's he's a smash this week. If we can see, what his status is. Hang on a sec. Aaron Jones looks like he's under 7% owned. So people are really scared off by that injury. If you see Aaron Jones, like any news on him before lineup lock tomorrow, where it says that like he won't have any limitations or anything. What's it say about him in the Draftkings blurb? Limited practice participant Wednesday and Thursday. Strained left hamstring. I mean, he's interesting. Like what did he do last week? Week 4 was the last week that he played. Didn't look like he did all that much before he went right back out of the game. But Aaron Jones he's in about as good a spot as you can ask for. And for DFS player, it's about as good a spot as you can ask for too, because he's got that mystery behind him that if he's in a smash spot and that's keeping his ownership down, that makes him very interesting. Russell Wilson doesn't have the best matchup because he's playing against a team that blitzes, and Russell Wilson can't handle the blitz. But if we wanted to go passing game on the Denver side, I think the weakest spot is probably against a slot receiver. So, I mean, if you can stomach it and put Jerry Jeudy in there, Jerry Jeudy's he's more expensive than he should be, honestly. Let's go a different direction with that. Let's go with Jones or Love. Let's get Love in there, and let's get Watson in there. Let's say it's Love, Jones, and Watson that are doing all the damage to Denver. I don't even want to, like try to bring it back with anyone because I don't really care about the Denver side. This might be a get right game for Green Bay. Try to get everybody on in sync. Let's try to let's get Hyatt in here. Let's see. Let's get all these games in here. Let's get Hyatt just to see where what kind of direction we could go here. Who's the tight end on Dulcich is out, I think. Or at least questionable. Let's get those Chiefs defense in here again. We'll get in Eckler. See what that does to salary. And let's get Rice in here. We got Rashee Rice. At least this was 6,500 per spot left. Maybe we can get Kelsey in here. We got Kelsey. Yeah, that leaves us with 5,100. That's an interesting way to go. Like I probably wouldn't go Chiefs D if I got a couple Chiefs pass catchers in the lineup along with Eckler at that point. I might go a different direction, like probably not the Bucks. I mean, the Rams are interesting, but they're expensive. If I'm looking for a cheap team, maybe the Seahawks. They're playing at home. So if I get the Seahawks, I probably want to get Kenneth Walker in there, but I guess that doesn't matter if I'm putting Eckler in there anyways. I can't really get to him unless I get rid of Kelsey. Let's say that Kelsey has a bad game. I mean, Kelsey's been hit or miss against Derwin James too. Like he had one big game against Derwin James, but Derwin James has shut him down. And you look at Kelsey's history against the Chargers is a little bit deceptive because most of those games don't take into account that Derwin James was out. But when he's faced Derwin James, his I believe yards per route run goes significantly down. So let's take out Kelsey. Let's say Rashid Rice is the guy that steps up and is the hero. That gives us an opportunity to put Kenneth Walker in there. That Seahawks D correlation gives us 5,300 left for a tight end that could get Waller in our lineup for us. Leaves us with options. So, it's a direction, another potential direction here. So that's why I love these cheap, like just sloppy shootout potential games. And the ones that I've kind of identified this week: Green Bay versus Denver, Arizona versus Seattle. Let's see, Washington versus the Giants. Those are the ones that I like the most. Let's try something else because I want to get I want to try to get Cup in one of these lineups. Let's try Cup. Let's see if we put Cup in there, we'd probably have to get rid of Walker. As far as tight end, let's say that we wanted to go with Musgrave. We already got two Packers in there. Let's say we go with Parham. That leaves us with 4,500 in the flex. If we go that way, that leaves us with options like Algier, Bourne. Let's see, Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds is always interesting. Look at it. Look at his targets he gets on some of these weeks. He's shown upside with 23.6 points. He had 17.6 against Carolina a couple weeks ago. So he's shown his spurts of upside. Let's kind of see who else we have as options here. I mean, we could go Zach Charbonnet with that Seattle D. He only got 2 attempts last week, but in a game where they should be playing from plenty ahead, he got 5 carries against the Giants when they were winning 24-3. 3 targets in that game. I mean, he just hasn't done anything this year. But if you wanted to, you could put a guy like Smith and Jigba in there. You got Elijah Moore as an option. Tutu Outwell. We already got Cup in there, so I probably wouldn't go. You know what? Let's try and put in Nakua instead. At least this was 6,400. If we got 6,400, that leaves us with opportunities like Cook, who should be getting a decent amount of work with Josh Allen banged up. They're not going to want him to run, but every time we try to go to Cook, he ends up doing nothing. He does have a few good weeks in there, but he doesn't have anything that's going to smash. Ooh, Jacoby Myers. Boom. Jacoby Myers at 6,200. That's the winner right there. Yeah, and I don't, Lockett. Lockett's another option. You got a ton of options if you put in. If we put in, let's say we put in Lockett with that great matchup, got him with the Seattle D instead of what's his face, Kenneth Walker. That leaves us 3,400 for the tight end position. Njoku, who we said has that good matchup. There's Musgrave again. Zach Ertz. I mean, Ertz would give us a run back. Ertz got less. He's giving up a decent amount of work to the other tight end in Arizona. You got Dalton Kincaid as an option. Parham. I like Parham this week for some reason. How many targets did Parham get last week? Because he was being used in the. He only got 3 targets. It felt like he got a lot more than that. But, Parham's an option. Otten. Um, yeah. So I mean, you can play around with it if you don't want to put in the Seahawks D. There's other ways you could go. We got less people from the Chiefs in there now, so let's put in Chiefs D. That leaves us with 4,200 at the tight end position. You can get in Henry, you can get in Pitts, um, Everett, you know, Njoku still, Komet, leaves you with a decent amount of options, but you can play around with that direction. We've seen the games that are worth targeting. Let's take a look at this game real quick between Kansas City and the Chargers. Let's see, Kansas City and the Chargers, 48.5-point total. KC is 5.5-point favorites. I don't see how KC is 5.5-point favorites in this game because KC show no upside on the offense, and the defense is what's winning games for Kansas City right now. I think it's catching up to them, like how they haven't developed any young players recently. Chargers, they've kind of been sloppy this year, but they do have a good offensive coordinator, probably the best offensive coordinator they've had in years. I wouldn't be surprised if that coordinator ends up being their head coach next year. So they have a decent offensive coordinator, one who knows how to use the weapons. Kansas City, their division opponents, they know how to play each other. Derwin James could shut down Travis Kelce and force Mahomes to use some of those cheap wide receiver options, which is why I like Rice and Tony this week. And then I like Pacheco too against that Chargers run D. Chargers run D has been a little bit better this year, but they're still giving up 25.6 Draftkings points per game to the running back position. They're also giving up 22.6 to wide receiver and 26 to slot, which is why I like Tony and Rashid Rice, because they seem like they're the guys that get the most consistent work. We look at Rice. He only got 4 targets last week, but he got 5, 5, 7. See, I mean, it's trending. Like, look at his output is the only one that you'll see double digits in with fantasy points, with 11 versus Denver, 13 versus Minnesota, 11 versus Chicago. So, I mean, 72 yards last week. They're trying to get him the ball. He's the only one who's been consistent. At some point, they're going to recognize that and say, okay, we got to stop with this stupid rotation. Tony, 6 targets last week, 3 receptions, 6 targets a week before that. When he's on the field, he's getting targeted, basically. 9.4 fantasy points. He scored a touchdown last week and only got him to 9.4 points. So, Tony, I'd go Rice over Tony for sure. But Tony's only 3,800, and he's got enough upside to kind of take him over that. Quentin Johnson's been a disappointment. First round draft pick. 2 targets, 3 targets, 3 targets, 2 targets, 3 targets. It hasn't even cracked 5 DK points. There's another rookie, Darius Davis, on the Chargers. And this guy has flashed some speed. He's making competent plays in the kick return game. He's had one game, 8.7 points a few weeks ago. I mean, he's got, he did a pretty big, I guess, jet sweep in that game because he had three rushing attempts for 51 yards. So Darius Davis, I wouldn't be surprised if Quentin Johnson, he can't click in this offense. Why are they going to keep trying to force him in? If they got a guy like Darius Davis with speed, I would not be surprised if they try to incorporate Darius Davis into this offense over Quentin Johnson if they can't get Johnson going. So, against the Chiefs, I mean, they're going to need to put up some sort of trick plays probably to get around that defense because Chiefs got a really good defense, and the Chargers are going to be desperate this week because they have to win. Like they have to win. They have to pull out a win here because they're getting to a desperation point, and the Chiefs are definitely beatable with their offensive struggles this year. So yeah, don't be surprised if you see Kellen Moore pull something out of his ass and maybe get Davis going here this week when everybody's expecting Quentin Johnson. What's it say about his blurb? No targets last week. Like he's a thin play, and he's 3,300 versus Hyatt, who's 3K, and I definitely much prefer Hyatt, and they're both going to be low owned, so it's not even an ownership play. But Davis is interesting this week. I don't think he's going to get any work, but he's going to do something eventually. I have a feeling. I just don't know, like when it would be. But I think that the Chargers are getting to the point where they have to decide, okay, we need another playmaker in the offense, and Quentin Johnson is not cutting it. They're either going to have to trade for a receiver, or they're going to have to, work with what they got. And what they got right now, behind Quentin Johnson is this Davis guy. So, keep an eye on that situation. I'm not saying necessarily play him this week, but if you want to, like take a lottery shot, Darius Davis is interesting. And other than that, I really like. There's just a bunch of scrubs. I do like Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer narrowly missed a couple touchdowns. He could have had a monster week last week. He only shows up as 10 fantasy points, but that's a little bit deceptive. He had 7 targets, 4 receptions, for 60 yards. Like one of those touchdowns, like if he got one of those touchdowns, maybe put in an extra 10 point. We're talking about a 20-point fantasy game for Josh Palmer last week. Keenan Allen's just been tons of targets, 11 targets, 5 targets, 20 targets, 10 targets, 9 targets. So Keenan Allen is definitely interesting. Other than that, Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce and the running backs. Austin Eckler, sluggish coming out last week. Only 10 fantasy points scored, but he was coming off of a hamstring, I believe. Or no, he was coming off an ankle. So I expected him not to be too crazy last week, but was not expecting him to only score 10 points. But Austin Eckler is interesting this week, and Pacheco is interesting this week. And I would say, Pacheco and Rashee Rice might be my favorite plays on the Kansas City side, and Eckler. And I mean Allen, goes without saying, but Eckler, I might lean more Eckler because Allen's been running a lot of deep routes this year, like as opposed to his traditional slot role. And I think that Herbert under pressure might be dumping off to Eckler this week. So Eckler is he's probably the guy on the Chargers that I'm most interested in. But Chargers got a difficult matchup this week, and this is a game that could easily go under the total, 48.5 point total. Could easily go under that. And if that goes under, let's say it went under by, like 4 points, that's 44.5 points, right? And if you stacked this Giants Washington game and they scored a touchdown over this 39.5 total, we're talking about 46.5 points, which would outscore the Kansas City game and put you in a much better position because you have a bunch of weapons that you spent next to nothing on, and they're outperforming the supposed game of the week. Like this is our game of the week this week, Washington versus the Giants. So keep an eye on that one. Be putting out a showdown show tomorrow for the Sunday night game. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page. Hit the like button. Need 15 likes to put out some shorter videos. Hopefully, I won't be coughing throughout the whole videos next time, coming off of a cold, which happens when you have a kid in daycare. But yeah, good luck, everybody, and let's crush it this week.